We are now in 3.5, day 2, the last portion of our unit for chapter 3. And we're going to finish up with a couple of different topics. One of those being talking a little bit more about log graphs and the domain of the log graph. Now, we've gone through the chapter and noticed that when we put a negative or a 0 inside for any of these logarithms, it becomes undefined. And so there isn't anything in there that's 0 or negative. We can't have that. So the way that we figure out the domain for each and every one of these is just by making sure that what's in here is positive. So you'll notice that I've got 4 different examples here. Each one is going to be done in a uniquely different way. But I want you to notice here that we've got x minus 1 in example 1. We just have to make sure that that's positive. So all we're going to do is say x minus 1 is greater than 0, which is the same as saying x is greater than 1, which when we're stating domain, as we have done in the past, we're going to put the domain in interval notation. So that means here 1 to infinity. So that's our domain for this first one. Now for the second one, notice that we've got 2 different log expressions, and whenever we combine a couple of different functions in any domain problem, we want to take the domain that is most restrictive. So from each one of these, I've got a different domain. I'm just going to think of them separately. So if it's just x, what we can do there is just that x is greater than 0, which is a domain of 0 to infinity. Okay, so that is for that first one. That's for the just plain ln x. For ln of x minus 5, like the last one, we're going to do x minus 5 greater than 0. And so that means that x is greater than 5. And so that, as interval notation, is, not 0, but 5 to infinity. So what we need to do now then, looking at those 2 different domains, is decide which one is more restrictive. The more restrictive one is the one that we always want to choose when we're combining things. The more restrictive one is going to be this one right here. So our domain for number 2 is going to be 5 to infinity. Okay? That is number 2. Number 3, you'll notice, is a little different because it's got an absolute value on there. When we have absolute value, remember that what comes out of that is always going to be a positive. So when we're setting this one up, we can think about this as being inside parentheses. We just have to have it where x is a positive. That means, where x is not 0. So if I did, let's say, x is less than 0, if I made these negative, I put them in, that would work. So that one's okay. But then also if I did x is greater than 0, well, that's positive already, so that one will work. The only thing that doesn't work here is just 0 itself. So when we're stating this domain in interval notation, we're going to have everything except for 0 itself. So negative infinity to 0 with a rounded bracket, and then 0 to infinity. So that includes everything except for 0 itself. So that's another example. The fourth one is going to be the most complicated, but I think based on what we did in chapter 2, this shouldn't be too bad for you. So we have to get this thing overall, remember, not equal to, but greater than 0. So here we're going to think back to sign charts. Now with sign charts, we made a number line where we determined, all right, what are the 0 and undefined values? And so we're going to do the same thing in this case. We're going to make a number line. And the value that makes it 0 is 1. The value that makes it undefined is 0. So we're going to have those 2 points on our number line. And then, like I've mentioned before, it's kind of a good idea to If you have one that's undefined, is maybe to mark that one as undefined, just so that we don't use that at any point. Now, test points. We want to make sure that we have, choose something over here, here, and here, make test points, make it into fraction. So maybe I choose -1, that would make it a negative on top, that would make it a negative on the bottom for this one. If I choose, let's say, 0.5, in here that would mean negative on the top, positive on the bottom, and maybe over here I choose +2, which would make it positive on the top, positive on the bottom. So as we map this out, then that makes this portion here positive, this one's negative, and this one's positive on our number line. Now, like we've been doing for these other examples, we need to make sure that what goes into this natural log, what goes into the parentheses, is positive only. We want this to be greater than 0. So now that tells us that our domain is going to be these positive intervals. Now, we don't want the zeros, we don't want the undefined, so we are again going to use rounded brackets. So -infinity to 0 and 1 to infinity. We will be skipping over that middle part.